Good morning. Welcome to another day of movement meditations. I've got an interesting lesson to do today. Hopefully, if you've done the previous 2 days, this will just kind of continue to make sense of some of these relationships. What I want to do initially is bring in my little skeleton, because this week we're talking about this relationship between the jaw and the pelvis. And that may not be an obvious relationship to you. The jaw is all the way up here, and the pelvis is all the way down here. Okay, so you may think, why or how is it possible that these two places could be related? So what we're going to do today is we're going to do some movements with the jaw and the head, and see if we can kind of tie in some of the stuff that we did yesterday with the pelvis, and see if it becomes clearer to you as we go through the lesson that there is some kind of relationship between these two places in us. Okay, so the first thing I'd like you to do is just close your eyes, take a moment to come to a kind of comfortable sitting position. One of the things I'm really enjoying about these lessons is that a lot of the Feldenkrais lessons that are taught to us on our training are done in lying down. And it's a bit of a challenge to kind of, think about some of them in terms of sitting and changing the orientation. So it's a nice process for me to go through as well. So as you sit there, just bring your attention very gently to your breathing. And just check in with yourself. Check in. How are you doing this morning? You may be in different time zones. It may be completely different time, or you're watching it later. But just take a moment to kind of settle into your experience. Good. So now, as you sit there with your eyes closed, maybe some gentle appreciation of your breathing. Just begin to very slowly, very gently nod your head upwards as if you were saying yes to something. Nod your head upwards and just back to normal. And just do that movement a few times. So you notice as I'm doing it, my head is just tilting very slightly backwards. And as you do this movement, this is a really small movement to begin with. What I want you to notice as you're doing this movement of just tilting your head very slightly backwards is that along the back of the spine, and in fact, you may need to look at me again for a moment. So along the vertebra of the cervical vertebra, so as you tilt the head backwards slightly, there's some closing of this structure. So it kind of compresses more down at the back. And then as the head is brought forwards, it kind of neutralizes. We will move the head forwards, but initially what I'd like you to feel is as you move the head backwards, that this area kind of closes a little bit. The spaces between the spinous process here at the back of the spine just close very gently as you take your head backwards. And just do that movement a few times. Just very gently, very slowly, keep breathing. And as you do that movement, can you feel a tendency in yourself as your head goes backwards for your pelvis or some movement to occur in your pelvis? So when we do this, we're taking our equilibrium off balanced, and then taking our head backwards like this is kind of, it's going to trigger some bodily mechanism to maintain balance. So you may feel somewhere else in your body adjusting. Just a very small movement to begin with. Very gentle, very subtle. Just seeing if you can feel that space along the cervical spine, the back of the spinous processes at the back of the spine. Just very gently closing. Good. And maybe as you do that, you can also notice that your chin raises upwards in space. So as you take your head backwards, there's an equivalent movement with your chin. Your chin is moving upwards. Can you now begin to do that movement, just kind of focusing or concentrating on the chin movement? Taking the chin upwards and back down. Notice if there's any difference when you concentrate on the chin. Keep your breathing nice and smooth. Does it change how the head goes backwards? Can you feel both of those two things at the same time? Can you feel that as you lift your chin, your head tilts backwards, and as you bring your chin back, your head comes back? See if you can feel those two things in unison. Good. Okay, take a little rest. And now yesterday we had a look at tilting the pelvis using the legs down onto the floor. So if you like, you have your feet resting on the floor comfortably. But the main thing I'd like you to do is very gently tilt your pelvis forwards and back to the middle. And just a few times, tilting the pelvis slightly forwards. So if you're sitting on your sitting bone, which is here, the pelvis is just going to tilt very gently forwards, So just try that a few times. And notice as you do that, as you tilt your pelvis forwards, again, it's kind of disturbing the balance mechanism or adjusting your sense of balance. And notice what your head does. Is there some equivalent movement? As you tilt your pelvis forwards in this way, does your head also make a movement? Take it nice and slowly. Keep breathing. Keep breathing. And just concentrating on this kind of sense of smooth movement forwards and then back to neutral in the pelvis. See if you can really feel that there's a kind of consistency to the movement. Good. Okay, and then take a little rest. And now go back to tilting the head backwards and taking the jaw forwards. And at the same time, can you integrate this feeling of the pelvis coming forward? Can they be happening at the same time? So as your head goes backwards in space, your chin comes upwards in space, and your pelvis is meeting that movement as if to kind of keep your sense of balance. Good. So then as you do that movement, think about the length of the spine all the way along the spine and what's happening all the way through the spine. Each vertebra. What's the kind of movement that the rest of the spine is making as you tilt your head backwards slightly, bring your chin up, have your pelvis rolling gently forwards. And what movement does the rest of your spine make? Your spine is obviously the place that's joining these two parts of your body together. So just feel as you move the pelvis forwards, as you tilt the head backwards, what's happening in the rest of the spine? Which parts of the spine do you feel are very much involved in that movement? And maybe which parts do you feel that are less involved? Good. Take a little rest. And a few times, just tilt the head backwards by itself again and just feel how that feels. How's that developing? Has it become easier in some way? Okay, good. And now what I'd like you to do is very gently begin to make a circular movement with the chin. Begin to make a circular movement with the chin. And take your time. You'll need to find it. So the chin moves to the right, up, to the left, and down. And just do this movement a few times, kind of round in a circle. Seeing if you can let the head move backwards in relationship to the chin. So you're kind of making this interesting movement on the top of the spine. Take your time, take it really slowly. See if you can kind of develop a very smooth circle. This is going to involve all of your neck muscles, even your shoulders. Feel how the head goes backwards at the same time as the jaw goes up. And then when you're ready, change directions, go in the other direction. Take your time, do it slowly, keep breathing. If you want, you can have your jaw a tiny bit open, just to feel that it's slightly more relaxed. Good. A few times, just making this circular movement. And then think about the back of the head again. So as you're doing it to the second direction, making the circle to the second direction, think about whether the back of the head is also making a circle. Can you concentrate on the back of the head making a circle instead of the chin for a second? Whoa. It's tricky, but possible. So try that movement a few times, maybe switching your attention a few times with the jaw. Maybe you want to change directions again, making a circular movement with the jaw, and then switching your attention to the same circle happening on the back of the head. So this area of the back of the head is also making a circle. Good. Okay, take a little rest. And then just tilt the head up, let the chin come up. Sorry, tilt the head back, let the chin come up, and just do that movement a few times and see if you can tie it back in with the forwards movement of the pelvis. Just kind of rejoin those two things. So as you tilt your head backwards, your chin comes upwards, and at the same time, you're rolling your pelvis very gently forwards. Maybe you feel that helps the chest come forwards as you take the head backwards, kind of facilitating the tilting of the head backwards more easily. So if you want, in that moment, you can combine this movement with your eyes. So go to looking up and then coming back to the middle and then looking up, back to the middle. Maybe you feel that coordinates more the kind of the whole spine, all the way from the pelvis, all the way up to the head and the jaw. Okay. So now what I want to do is if you just let go of the head movement for a moment, but maybe just take a moment before you do anything else, just to feel how your head is sitting. So the way that the head rests on the spine, it's quite an interesting little part of our body. If you think that, a big part of our process in our daily lives is keeping our head balanced so that our senses are orientated well to the things around us. So there's this sense of the head, the skull, sitting kind of delicately on top of the spine. So just see how that is for you now. Check in with the contact you have on the chair, feeling your sitting bones, and maybe just kind of bring your attention back to your breathing. What's the experience of your breathing now? Good. And now what I'd like you to do is very gently see if you can lift up the right side of your pelvis so that more of your weight pours into the left side of your pelvis. And just try that movement a few times. Lifting up the right side of the pelvis away from the chair so that more of the weight comes down onto the left side of the pelvis. Maybe do it like 5 or 10 times. Just so that you can feel that there's a sense of weight shift in the pelvis. Good. And then a few times once you've come back to the middle, take a slight rest and try the same thing to the right side. So lifting the left side of the pelvis a few times and feeling how the weight kind of transfers across onto the right side of the pelvis and the sitting bone on the right side. So just do that movement a couple of times, maybe 5 or 10, and see if you can keep breathing at the same time and notice what your head does. How does your head adjust? We didn't do that on the first side, but maybe we'll go back and check. But as you're lifting up the left side of your pelvis and you're taking your weight over to the right side, what movement does your head make? Does it also adjust in relation to balance? Okay, take a little rest. And then can you go between the two sides? Can you lift on the left and then lift on the right? Noticing what your head does in order to facilitate this movement. Can you make this process of transferring weight, of lifting one side of the pelvis and the other side of the pelvis, a comfortable, easy movement? So it's not difficult, it's not strenuous, it's just like a slight lift, a slight pouring down of weight into one side, and a slight lift and a slight pouring down of weight into the other side. Doesn't need to be a big thing. Great. Take a little rest. Just come back to this tilting the head backwards movement. Tilting the head backwards, bringing the chin up. Just do that a few times and check in with your breathing. Notice if your pelvis is moving again and see if you can kind of tie in the movement of the pelvis so that the pelvis rolls forwards as you tilt your head backwards. Coordinating these two kind of far away places. Rolling the pelvis forwards on the sitting bones as you tilt the head backwards, and the back of the spinous process in the cervical spine is just kind of getting shorter. It's kind of like everything tilts as your head tilts backwards. The back of the spine kind of contracts slightly and the front of the spine opens. Good. So now take your weight over to the left side and see if you can keep yourself there in some way so that you're organized, so that the right side of your pelvis is lifted a little, and the weight is poured down into the left side of the pelvis. So see if you can stay in that position and then tilt the head backwards and forwards a few times in this position, feeling what that does to your sense of balance. Good. Noticing if your pelvis comes slightly forwards as you do this movement. It can be very subtle. It doesn't need to be something you're doing consciously, but you may notice that the pelvis does automatically provide some kind of mechanism for balancing the entire torso. So as you take the head backwards, the pelvis automatically wants to be involved. Good. So now what I'd like you to do is stay organized over to the left side and begin to make these chin circles again. Making these chin circles and see if you can keep breathing. Notice as you make these chin circles that there's also a circle on the back of the head. It's tricky to look at myself and do it at the same time. So as you've got your weight organized over to the left side, and you're feeling this circular movement, is there also a circular movement happening all the way down on your sitting bone? Can you feel that as you make this circular movement of the head, and the back of the head is also making a circle, is there some sense of a small circle occurring round the sitting bone? Good. Let it go. Come back to the middle. And then just go into this kind of beginning movement that we did, tilting the head backwards a few times, seeing how that's developing. How does it feel now? How does the jaw come forwards? Maybe taking the movement, leading the movement from the jaw a few times. And see, is the pelvis coming more naturally involved in the movement than it was at the beginning of the lesson? Is there less sense of restriction in the pelvis than there was? Good. Okay, when you're ready, come back to the middle. Just take your weight over to the right side and stay there for a second. Stay there so that you've got the left side of the pelvis lifted and the right side of the pelvis with the weight on it. And then again, come back to making this tilting movement so that the jaw comes up and the head tilts back. Just do it a few times, very gently, very lightly. Feel your breathing as you do this. And then when you're ready, begin to make these chin circles, feeling that as you make a chin circle, there's also a circular movement happening with the back of the head. And notice as you make these chin circles, is there some sense of movement happening down on the sitting bone, on the right sitting bone that you're sitting on? It could be very subtle. It could be like minute movement. But as you change the position of your head, your body will be accommodating those changes of position in order to try and keep you balanced. So just notice how your body does that. Good. When you've done it a few times in one direction, take it in the other direction. And if you can, switch your attention between the movement of the jaw, the circular movement of the jaw, and the circular movement of the back of the head. Noticing if there's any corresponding circle happening on the sitting bone. Good. Come back to the middle. Just a few times in the middle. Take the head backwards, take the chin upwards, and notice if that's changed at all. The range has changed for you. And notice if your pelvis is coming more involved in the movement. If you think again through the whole length of your spine as you do it, is that same shortening that's happening in the cervical spine, is that happening along the whole length of the spine? Good. So let that go. Just sit for a moment and just feel how your head is resting. Now, what I want you to do just to end the lesson is a few times tilt your head forwards and tilt your head backwards and just feel the difference between those two things. Tilting the head backwards. We didn't spend any time tilting the head forwards. So maybe it feels to you that the sense of balance that you have from the rest of your torso does not provision well for the head coming forwards. But for the head coming backwards, there's a sense of that your torso provides support after the lesson that we've just done. And I'd love to get your feedback about that, because that was a little experiment. I hope that was useful. Hopefully you don't feel too dizzy from doing the back of the head circles. If you do, just spend some time rocking the pelvis and just feeling how the head and the jaw moves as you rock the pelvis forwards and backwards. That will really kind of just ground everything down again. So thank you for watching. The link to the previous lessons is in my Facebook group. That's written in the description. There's also a link to my PayPal account if you want to make a small contribution to these lessons. Obviously, it's really beneficial to me, and hopefully the lessons have been beneficial to you in some way, and you've got some usefulness from them. So thank you for watching. I will be back tomorrow with more of the same series, looking at the movement of the jaw and its relationship with the pelvis. So hopefully that's continuing to be interesting for you. And I'd love to get your feedback about today's lesson. Thank you for watching, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.